request of the Board of Assessors to release and place in the overlay surplus an amount of money to be voted at the special town meeting for this particular purpose. And I know that they haven't met yet, but I know that that meeting is coming up. And I've spoken with Mr. Tassoni, and he confirms the dollar amounts that I indicated to you that would be available in overlay
And
reserve.
that meeting will take place before
Absolutely,
public hearing on the
absolutely.
town meeting, okay. Questions, anybody?
Are you suggesting that the entire Quinn bill amount that's owed come out of the overlay?
I would suggest that, and then that there had been some discussion. I had spoken with Chief Nolan relative to curtailing some of his department expenditures for the remainder of the fiscal year. Like to see him do is bring his budget in under target for the year so that there's an amount of money that can be funded and be available for that purpose, funding the Quinn bill.
At this point, you're looking for a motion from us?
No motion yet. The board doesn't need to vote this until you have your public hearing. And I do know that at the public hearing, there may be members of the department that we hear, but that nevertheless, they'll have an opportunity to be heard at that time.
So, once again, you're suggesting that, well, overlay reserve does not cover it all.
Right.
So, and we're not sure, or do we have an idea as to whether or not there's anything pending before the appellate tax board for fiscal year 2010?
That's why I've asked the Board of Assessors to give us that exact number. According to the finance director, he's not aware of any major cases that are before the ATB at this point. But if there were, that would certainly be deducted from the amount that we have available.
Okay. And again, so the potential shortfall is how much?
If you look at the sheet that's here, the total obligation for 2 years, and what I'm simply doing is I'm taking the 6-month cost and rolling it forward, would be about $406,590. Excuse me, $406,500. So I would envision that the gap would be filled through some salary reductions within the department.
Salary reduction?
Savings and overtime.
Okay, not a satin, so,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
Yeah, I don't want to say,
not
yeah.
Salary.
No,
reduction. Talking about-
savings and overtime.
Okay.
Savings and overtime, my apologies.
And this total amount deducts from the minuscule amount we're getting from the state, the Quinn bill.
Yeah, $13,000+ for this year.
That's the town's contribution.
It is. It nets out the minuscule amount that the town has already paid.
And the calculations of what was owed prior to when we started paying
Right.
included the small amount that came from the state.
It was. It made sure that those amounts,
Put in there before, okay.
those amounts were netted out, so the total
That's
is.
the actual amount owed.
It is.
Are we going to have an agreement from each particular union within the police department as to these numbers before our public hearing and/or prior to town meeting?
That's my goal. I think it's important to do that. I can't tell you whether there'll be an agreement, Selectman Delaney, but the effort is there. And I think the effort is there from the union to work with the town and have an understanding for that also.
I'd hate to go to town meeting and we're light years apart in terms of what they expect and what we expect this total number to be.
Understood.
So just make sure I get the right numbers. 322,805.47. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
322?
322,805. You take the
No, that-
total.
No.
406,500.
406,500.
You gotta take into account an estimate of twin bill payments from the time we started
Oh,
to
no,
the
no,
end
I
of
know
the
that.
year.
I'm just
Okay.
trying to make sure that the two spreadsheets you have here, that's what the total is, and then you have to bring in the estimates, right?
Correct. We have to
I just wanna-
estimate 6 months going forward.
So that's the number, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'm opposed at this time to looking at the cost reductions through the department. If you recall, last town meeting when we had our appropriations for the police department, and we went around and around and around on this whole issue before, that's what was needed and necessary. we cut it, and then we came back and we restored most of it, if not all of it, in order to
We did.
maintain the levels. So what we're talking about now is another potential $50,000 to $60,000 or more.
61,347.
Reduction in overtime in a 5-month time period. That is a huge, huge hit incrementally to make up in 5 months, 4 or 5 months. 4 or 5 months. I don't see how it can be managed and continue to have the police department operate effectively when we all agreed a few months ago that we're pretty close to what we needed with the appropriation to function properly. So I just want to state up front that I have no intention of supporting any motion that would impact the overtime budget of the police department this particular time of funding the shortfall. We have some free cash available. I don't particularly like going to the stabilization fund either. There may be some additional funds available through the reserve funds, finance committee, that we can look towards, and I think from a public safety standpoint, and a functional standpoint for the police department, I think it's essential that we look to other sources other than the current operating budget. There's so little time left in the fiscal year to try and manage ourselves out of this. So, and maybe we'll find, as we look at it a little more closely and the town meeting comes a little bit closer, maybe what I'm saying is true. We just might not be able to manage culling out $50,000 to $70,000 out of the current fiscal operating budget, the police department, in order to fund it. So I think we should be looking elsewhere, while still encouraging the chief to economize and hopefully have some funds to turn back in, which will be available for free cash after the fiscal year closes. But to cut the police department this late in the game, I think is unwise and extremely, it could be harmful.
Given that, I'd ask the town administrator to have the chief prepared to give us an update of where we are with the overtime budget. How much of it's been spent to date?
And again, if you recall, we're operating a couple of officers short, which requires additional overtime to meet the needs of the public. So we've economized by not filling vacancies. When we do that, it's a necessary part of filling some shifts and picking up some responsibilities by other officers on overtime. So I mean, we've been balancing the budget right now and trying to operate effectively, and I think we're getting close to living on the edge here as to whether or not we should be hiring more officers or not, help manage our overtime. But to slash the overtime to fund this particular line item, I don't think is wise.
Well, I think, looking at it from the point of view of looking for $50,000 out of the overtime budget for a period of 5 months, maybe that is a stretch. But the bottom line is, as we go into FY 212, the situation that we're in, we are gonna have to throttle back overtime, no matter what. There's not gonna, I'm talking about balancing the 2012 budget, not 2011. So I think the message needs to be sent, fire, police, all our other departments. They have to start managing that because there's gonna be less of it next year. There's no way out of that. And it's got nothing to do with the Quinn bill or anything else. It's got to do with the fact that we're approaching 2012. We know it was gonna be the worst year coming out of the economic downturn. And we already know we have a deficit, and it could grow worse if we don't achieve some of the goals that were set forth.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but I see these as two separate issues, and again, I don't want to be looked upon as sending a message about next year, meeting our obligation for this year. Two separate issues. And, we're staffed at a certain level right now, unless you're prepared to, cut staffing. And again, I don't know what programming the police department can give up on at this particular point in time in order to realize the savings. But I don't think we should be meeting our obligation because of this judgment out of the overtime budget, when we have other reserves available. And we knew, again, obviously, we planned pretty well to cover the major gap of this and have this money set aside in anticipation of an unfavorable ruling. But the shortfall, again, is too much to absorb in a short period of time for that one particular department. Just a few short months.
I agree with the chair. I think I'd like to hear from Chief Nolan in terms of where the overtime budget is currently, how it's been managed up to this point in time, how he projects managing that through the balance of the fiscal year. I personally wouldn't touch stabilization fund for this particular purpose. Free cash, although it looks like there's a healthy sum there. We got a snow and ice deficit right now. It's probably approaching $500,000 or better. So we have a number of issues that we have to consider. But before I vote in any way in terms of how the balance of this Quinn bill is going to be funded, I do want to hear from Chief Nolan.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have to concur with Bob and Sean, and I agree with Steve. I think reaching into the overtime budget does put us at risk. We are gonna need more information. We need the chief's information to see what he's doing there, to get through this. And I agree with Bob that, I know Steve, you're saying that we can't, the two different issues of 2012 and now, but we're in a tough bind right now. We gotta figure out a way how to do this. And as I look right now, the overlay is probably gonna help us out, but maybe some from the OT budget from the police and somewhere else. So we've got some time. We just have to see what the numbers show us as we go forward.
And again, maybe we should be looking at prioritizing things if we have this, we do have this shortfall, but maybe we should be prioritizing and looking at other departments and other aspects of general government in order to fund this, unfortunately. So it's, instead of just, say, don't hone in on the police department budget, and if there's some savings that can be realized in order to help meet the obligation, fine. But don't necessarily want to jeopardize services that the police department needs to provide to the community. If that's the case, then maybe some other areas of general government, maybe this can be some savings realized with 4 or 5 months to go in the fiscal year to help fund our obligation, to meet this obligation. So, look outside the police department. Charge the administration with doing that too. Are there other savings that can be realized within other departments so we can transfer, funds into the salary account in order to meet our obligation? So, instead of just, it's easy to just say, well, it's a police department problem. Well, it's not. It's a community problem, community situation. And again, I don't fault the police department or the union for the outcome. They had a responsibility to protect their membership. They did it well. We had an obligation to protect what we felt was the town's position and interest. We did that well, and a decision was made. And we're still appealing. So I think we've made the right decision going forward to meet our obligations. But again, I think we should look beyond the confines of the police department to close the gap. So maybe we can take a look at other departments. 5,000 here, 3,000 there, that's fine.
I think Greg got the message.
I'll report back to the board at its next meeting.
Okay, and I would like to hear, I'd like a report of where we are with the police overtime budget.
I understand, and I know,
How much has been spent through our next meeting?
I know that
This week.
I know that the run rate, and I can't speak to specific percentages, was above